Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into just one chapter of an absolute classic, and we're going to uncover one of the most incredible transformations in all of literature. We're going to see how a man can be completely broken down and then rebuilt, forged into something new, all from inside the darkest place imaginable. Let's get into it.
So, this is the Chateau d'If. It's this grim fortress sitting out in the middle of the sea. For sailors, it was a terrifying sight. But for our hero, a young sailor named Edmond Dantes, this fortress became his entire world. It literally swallowed him whole.
All right, so first off, we have to understand the sheer, soul-crushing hopelessness that Dantes was up against. This wasn't just some prison, it was basically a tomb for the living.
You know, inside that cell, time it stopped meaning anything. The only thing he had to mark the days was the stale bread and water that showed up. At first, he hoped his friends would rescue him. But as the months just bled into each other, that hope just withered. It was replaced by the guards' cruel taunts and a silence so deep it felt like it was physically breaking him.
And that became his new reality. I mean, the despair was so total, so absolute, that death started to look like a pretty good option. He seriously thought about just starving himself. Anything to make the pain stop. He had hit rock bottom. And I mean the absolute bottom.
But then, right when it seemed like it was all over, something changed. In that total, suffocating silence, something impossible happened. One evening, as he's just lying there in the dark, he hears a sound. It's a faint, steady, scratching noise, coming from under the floor. Now, the interesting thing is, the rhythm was too steady, too deliberate. This wasn't a rat. This was someone.
Can you just imagine that moment? He taps and everything goes silent. He holds his breath and then a response. An answer from the darkness. After months of being utterly alone, Dantes literally cries out with joy. In that one simple sound, hope comes flooding back into his soul. He wasn't alone.
So fueled by this incredible new hope, Dantes gets to work. He starts digging, tearing at the stone and mortar with his bare hands, all for the promise of hearing another human voice. And on the other side of that wall, well, that's where he'd find the man who was about to change his life forever.
And the contrast here is just wow. He breaks through the wall and meets Abbé Faria. So on one side you've got Dantes, this young, desperate sailor, his mind just clouded by anger and injustice. And on the other side, you've got Faria, an old, brilliant scholar whose mind is like a razor, sharpened by years and years of thinking.
The abbé explains that, he'd been digging an escape tunnel for years, but he'd miscalculated and ended up in the wrong cell. But here's the crazy part. He wasn't disappointed, not at all. You want to know why? Because his mistake brought him a friend. He had turned this horrible confinement into his own personal university. And that, right there, was Faria's whole philosophy. For Dantes, who was just letting his mind rot in despair, this was a complete revelation. It was like a light bulb went off. He realized he hadn't just found a friend, he'd found a teacher who could open up a world inside his own mind bigger than any ocean he'd ever sailed.
So Faria gives Dantes something way, way more valuable than an escape plan. He gives him knowledge.
And just like that, in the pitch-black darkness of a dungeon, this incredible school was born. Faria, the brilliant scholar, starts teaching, and Dantes, the sailor, becomes this incredibly dedicated student. He just soaks it all up. Languages, history, science, philosophy, military strategy, you name it.
And this right here, this is that profound internal shift. Dante's mind, which was once pretty simple, focused on sails and tides, it becomes sharp, disciplined, sophisticated. He's being completely reforged, piece by piece, not by a blacksmith's hammer, but by the words of a scholar in the dark.
You think that's it? Oh, not even close. The lessons weren't over. Faria had one last world-shattering secret he needed to share.
As Faria's health started to get worse, he knew his time was running out. So he entrusted his most precious secret to his student, the location of the legendary Spada family fortune. We're talking about a treasure of almost unimaginable wealth, just hidden away on some tiny island.
But, and this is a huge but, it came with a very important condition. This treasure was not for buying yachts and mansions. It was a tool, an instrument to be used for justice. So this wasn't just a pile of gold, it was a weapon. It had a moral purpose. And with that, everything just clicked. The education from ثريا gave him the mind, and now the treasure gave him the means. For the very first time since he was thrown in that cell, Dantes saw a future. He wasn't a victim anymore. He was a man armed with the knowledge and the power to completely rewrite his own destiny.
And that question, right there, is what ignites the entire rest of this legendary story. It's the moment that the simple sailor Edmond Dantes dies, and the powerful, calculating Count of Monte Cristo begins to be born. It sets the stage for one of the greatest, most epic tales of justice ever told.